It's Friday, March 16th. Let's talk PlayStation. Oh boy, where do I even begin? So yeah, we have a lot of PlayStation news stories to talk about this week. In fact, it's actually a pretty good news week. There's a few things that we can discuss at greater length. Good conversations all around, as always. But we should mention it, as, you know, we've been building up to this for the past few weeks, but you know I number each and every Let's Talk PlayStation. This is episode 300. I've been doing this 300 weeks. I have not missed a single week. The first episode was June 2012, so I've been doing this for a very long time. We'll get into some more theatrics at the end of the video. In fact, there's actually a little surprise at the end of the video, a little episode 300 announcement, something very cool. You'll definitely want to stick around and check that out. But just for the hell of it, let's actually take a look at what we did for episode 200. And just for the hell of it, let's actually look at what we did for episode 100. And just for the hell of it, let's take a look at episode 1. Roll it. The game. So now we know a little bit more about it. And stop it. Whoa, okay. Looks like I got a little bit better at this YouTube thing, huh? Alright, I think I'm getting a little better at this YouTube thing. If you haven't picked up on it by now, I'm pretty much going to do this every 100 episodes. So that'll be cool. We'll see how long we can get that to loop. And it ends up taking an entire minute of just rewinds from every 100 episodes, because that's pretty much all I've got. Alright, first news story. This one came out a little bit late from last week. This came out right after LTPS came out last week, but Sony announced Days Gone is officially delayed into 2019. Not really surprising. We don't need to spend too much time talking about this. Two factors really to point out. One, if the game's not ready, the game's not ready, and we haven't really seen a whole lot of Days Gone anyway, so yeah, I could see why they need more time to put the game in the oven. And number two, there's actually a lot of games. It's like a heavy, holiday season coming up for 2018, So just seems like kind of a no-brainer for Sony, in all honesty. So I'm sure this was a pretty easy decision for them to do. Another news story that came out right after the Days Gone news story, this one was also announced. So Naughty Dog is promoting creative director Neil Druckmann to co-president of Naughty Dog. So he's actually got a pretty big position now at Naughty Dog. Congrats to Neil. Of course, he's pretty important at Naughty Dog, and he's been a pretty important person within the company in the last few games that they've been working on and stuff. I guess the only notable thing about this is that, while we know Bruce Straley left the company last year because he just got burned out, and that's something we talk about somewhat often when it comes to these developers working on very high-profile games at high-profile developers with these multi-million-dollar budgets, is that a lot of them always say that the work kind of tires them out and it makes them want to move on to something else. At the very least, we know that with Neil. Well, it looks like he's pretty committed since he's taken a promotion with the company, so it seems like he's going to stick around for probably a while. And he is still creative director of The Last of Us Part 2. And there were a few other promotions within the company as well, but overall, good news for Neil. So we'll try and breeze past this one real quick, because this is somewhat recent. In fact, I'm even somewhat scared to talk about this news story, because I feel like right after I upload this, the official announcement's gonna come. But anyway, there was a slight possible leak of somebody saying that the game was the Spyro Trilogy, the rumored remaster, it was gonna get announced yesterday around 4 p.m. Well, at least EST for my time, but 1 PST. And they said, oh yeah, Activision's going to announce it. It's going to be called Spyro the Treasure Trilogy or whatever. And basically the time came and went, and nothing ended up happening. So that's kind of a bust. But maybe it's possibly very close. I'm very confident that this is more than likely happening. I mean, when there's just times when there's certain rumors that come out, and you see the publications that are posting it. You see the woodwork going around. I mean, there's just certain rumors that you can tell right away, oh yeah, this is probably definitely going to be happening. So I'm fairly confident this is going to be a real thing. It's just a matter of when Activision's going to announce it. So I'm just worried that they're going to end up announcing it after this is filmed and uploaded. So that'll annoy me. And hey, if that actually ends up happening, then this will be an interesting sort of oxymoron that we're having as of right now. But I want to see gameplay of it. That's the number one thing I want to see. I want to see what it will look like, because that Crash Bandicoot treatment looked so good, and I really want to see Spyro get that treatment. I just want to look at it, because those games mean a hell of a lot more to me than Crash ever did. And I love Crash, but I gotta have my Spyro. So this one I think was pretty interesting just because it's kind of information that we now know, and it's cool to think about. On a Reset Arrow forum, the community director for Insomniac Games, James Stevenson, actually discussed how Sony and Marvel actually approached Insomniac about doing a Marvel property, and Insomniac actually had a choice of what they wanted to do, basically, and Insomniac settled on Spider-Man. So he said, long story short, Sony came to us and asked if we wanted to work with Marvel. Sony and Marvel let us decide what character/universe we wanted to make a game based on. We chose Spider-Man. So, cool. I mean, what I've noticed a lot about Sony over the years with the deals they do, and specifically their first-party studios, is that they typically are very open-ended. Like, they let them do what they want to do, and that's always been a pretty important value for Sony when they want to work with developers, and they just want developers to have their creative vision, you know what I mean? They want them to kind of let loose and enjoy what they're doing, right? There's not too many stories of Sony demanding a certain developer work on this game, this, that, and the other, and certainly those things happen, but it also seems like a lot of developers within Sony's woodwork get, they kind of get free reign to do what they want to do. Because realistically, from a creative standpoint, when you have a creator that gets to do what they want to do, you end up getting a much better product. And that's the case here with Insomniac Games. And of course, Insomniac has deep roots with Sony. Sony doesn't own Insomniac or anything, but it's, there's that long history, like the Ratchet & Clank games, the Resistance games. So that's kind of how this whole deal, I would assume, worked out, because Sony knows, hey, Insomniac's hell of a good developer, why don't we just approach them with this deal? So it's also interesting that we know that this was actually something Sony and Marvel wanted to do, just somewhat randomly, it appears. I mean, of course, there's a lot of buzz going on with Marvel, nowadays, or the last 10 decades, or the last decade, not 10 decades, but the last decade, Marvel's been pumping out a lot of crazy stuff. It's just like, okay, so like, they just want a game, but thankfully that was like the case with this, right? Where it's like, all right, well, let's give it to a developer that's good, you know what I mean? And let's just let them pick a property. Let them pick what they want to do, and we will more than likely get a pretty good game out of it. And we'll find out how good Spider-Man is when it comes out, but I mean, I feel like a lot of us are probably pretty confident. Like, yeah, Spider-Man's probably going to be a good game. So we'll see when the game comes out. Alright, so I thought we'd talk about this because it's not really much of a news story, but it's an update nonetheless, and we probably won't get another update for a while, so might as well have this one. Final Fantasy VII, the remake. So Square Enix has some job listings that they recently posted for core members of the development team. That, they still need core members, they still need positions to fill. Basically, this news story boils down to, like, we're not going to see this game for a long time. And the game's director, Nomura, also recently said, like, it's probably going to be quite some time before we see the game again in any sort of meaningful capacity. So, like, it's just like classic Square Enix, you know what I mean? Like, I hate to be the one to critique, because, what the hell do I know? But it just seems like time and time again, this is like Square Enix trouble with like a lot of their games. They just take too damn long. They just take too long. Or at the very least, if they're going to take this long, stop announcing them this early. And I understand. Here's the thing. I completely people hate that games get announced too early. I totally get why people don't like that. But I also totally get why developers and publishers want to announce them early for a number of reasons. The big one being they want it on their terms. They hate when this kind of shit leaks, especially when a team works 80 hours a week on a project that they're super excited about but they can't talk about, and then some dickhead wants to post it on the internet. Sure, it's exciting for everybody else, but they want the announcement to be on their terms, and when a project costs that kind of money, they want the news to be out there for a while and some, for hype to gestate for the game and for it to make money when it comes out. So I can sympathize with that, but yeah, we won't see this so I'll see you in like 2020 whenever we talk about this game again. So this is a news story where it's like, cool, nice to know. So, because Detroit's obviously we've been talking a lot about Detroit. So recently we actually got some numbers about like the script and characters and camera shots. Really cool numbers, fascinating stuff. So in Detroit Become Human, we got a little idea of the crazy stuff that's going on here. 513 characters in the game, all unique, I'm assuming. 2,000 pages of script pages. 35,000 camera shots, camera angles, 74,000 unique animations, 5.1 million lines of code. We don't really often hear these numbers, so you can't really get like a real good perspective. Of course, these numbers sound pretty insane. I'd have to imagine they're probably higher in comparison to a lot of other games, maybe in terms of one aspect or the other. But I'm excited. It's just more Detroit stuff. I really am. You guys know I'm totally all in for this game. I'm gonna say it once again. If this game comes out and it's nothing short of like amazing, I feel like they really dropped the ball, or they just presented this game in literally the best way possible. You know, it just looks like it's set for success, I hope. Hey, so here's some more news on some crossplay stuff. If you didn't see, Fortnight is getting crossplay because recently the game was announced to be coming to mobile, and there's going to be crossplay for people on mobile, people on PC, and people playing Xbox One or PS4, which is cool, right? Oh, sweet, everybody can play together. But it's like, oh, here's the one little caveat: Xbox One can crossplay with PC and mobile, PS4 can crossplay with PC and mobile. But Xbox One and PS4 obviously can't go together. So it's weird. Like, you'll basically have player lobbies where if you're playing PlayStation 4, you can certainly play with PC and mobile players, but you're not going to be playing with Xbox One players. And then same, vice versa with Xbox One. That's just weird to me. I feel like that complicates things, servers, like a matchmaking side. But this is just another example of Sony pretty much saying no. Phil Spencer was on Twitter saying, me too, responding to a fan about how they want crossplay for for all platforms, for it to be seamless. So this is, just another nail in the coffin of that idea of crossplay ever happening. Looks like it's still a no. All right, our final news story I think is really cool because it's a great conversation into what we could possibly see in the next generation of consoles, or even the next generation after that, or just games in general, and possibly where they can go. And because it deals specifically with that idea of diminishing returns when it comes to just how much better games keep getting in terms of their visual aspect or their scope. It's nice that games get more and more pretty and they look better and better, but it's those diminishing returns. They only get just slightly better every little bit, right? And they just keep getting more and more costly to make. And when you've got a situation from Nathan Drake on the PlayStation 3 and Uncharted Drake's Fortune, all the way up to Drake and Uncharted 4, the polygon count is just so gosh darn high. It takes that much longer to do a single character model. You got to pay those people to do it, and it goes into the whole stressful cycle of being a developer for, these big budget games. Anyway, so here's into the real news story. So anyway, there was an interview with on Gaming Bolt with Roderick Kennedy. He's the founder of Simul Software, a company that created True Sky, which is like a really advanced sky system, which is basically a system in place where you can procedurally generate stuff within games. And procedural generation, of course, is like RNG, random number generation. Think, to put it into simplest terms, think of like when you start up a new Minecraft world and the seed just randomly generates a world, right? That's what we're kind of talking about here. That's what his company does, and that's what that system in place does for software, right? Procedurally generates certain assets for video games. And he basically mentioned in this interview how he feels that possibly the next generation or two, that's what we could probably see moving forward. In fact, he was quoted as saying, "I anticipate a big move towards procedural content in the next generation or two. The generation of content is not limited by computing power, space, or even bandwidth so much as the human capital that's expended in creating it. I think that we've pioneered with Skies in terms of 100% generated content, albeit with artistic input and program control would become the norm for 3D objects, textures, and gameplay elements. None of that takes away from the craft and creativity that goes into games. It's a new set of tools that developers will use in ways we can't yet imagine." So I want to focus on that part that he mentioned in the first part there, about how we're not necessarily limited anymore to computing power or space or bandwidth, but just the actual fact of humans working on the games in general, because that's really what it all boils down to. With the rising costs of games and it taking longer and longer to make games and needing more and more staff to make games, it's just like it becomes a little bit unsustainable, as we've seen in recent years, as we've seen in the last decade, where tons of developers have gone under, tons of publishers have closed up shop and all their IPs went up for sale. And that's also another reason why we see a lot of independent games in the last 5 years or so really flourish, because their overhead is not nearly as high, because, well, typically their games are not that crazy ambitious with the way they're presented to you. Some of them are very 8-bit, 16-bit, or they're artistically approached. They got that stenciled look to it. You know what I mean? There's tons of independent games, but they're all small, and they are usually a very small team. But that's why those games do so well. That's why we see so many frequent releases on Steam and PSN and Xbox Live and Switch. Those small $15, $20 games, those games have been doing really well, and that's why. And that's why so many other big budget games just can't make the cut anymore. So what he's getting at is that possibly within the next generation or two, you might see more of a lean toward procedural generation of content to aid, developers in the long-term development of more on those really high budget video games, the multi-million dollar ones. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the procedural generation is going to completely encapsulate the entire point of the game, right? It's more so for certain things that can offset the work of the developer. So something very simple, like a tree, right? Somebody has to be responsible for making and designing that tree. This is kind of where he's getting at, where you can have a program, an asset or something, kind of handle this a little bit and just generate a tree for you. And, need be, I would assume this application also allows the software to, build, a representative asset, right? And then somebody can go in and handcraft it up a little bit and touch it up a little bit. Of course, I don't know all the fine details of it, but you got to figure that's a little bit of how it works. And that would be hopefully very good, right? Because that is the problem. We want a little bit of workload to be taken off developers, and they can focus on the more important things. And that's we want developers to make good character models. We want them to focus on a long narrative or tons of cool side quests, or focus heavily more on a clean UI or squash bugs, and have certain things that can be, is something very simple like buildings or maybe buildings may be a little too complex. Maybe that is something that you have a human do, but maybe not, depending on what the game is going for, depending on what the developer is aiming for with their game. Certainly, it's vastly different depending on every single game and what every single developer is trying to accomplish in their game. But with something like simulating a sky, creating water in a game, again, foliage, trees, those were things that one person would always be, well, not one, but, you'd have to assign humans to do that stuff. And having any sort of help in the SDK to alleviate that stress from the team and offset the workload can actually help long term, or at least that's the idea. And that's the thing. This conversation is super far reaching. I think that's why he even mentions that this is even a generation or two away from being maybe an industry-wide thing that many developers will end up using. But it seems like it's a very viable way to go in the next 10 years or so. Those are just some of the news stories that I wanted to talk about with you guys this week for the 300th time. Man, crazy stuff. All right, so you might be wondering, what is this little surprise that Ryan has planned? Well, I guess maybe I should show you right now. Also, little warning to headphone users, it might get a little loud coming up soon, but check this out. Yep, your boy just remastered himself. What up? Well, really, I guess more of a remake, if you want to get technical, but remaster just sounds better, you know, and it just worked out overall better. But yeah, expect that Monday. What the fuck's wrong with me? All right, so expect that Monday. And so the 2 videos from earlier this week, the 2 new videos. Shit, what did I upload? Wow, this is bad. The fuck did I upload? Oh, I almost had to check it. Top 5 hardest trophies I've ever earned in all the years that I've been trophy hunting. Cool video. Kind of another story video, so you guys really like the story stuff. That's awesome. I'll try and film more of those. And then the best Last of Us multiplayer montage ever. I'm noticing not many people clicked it, which is, you know, fine. They tell me if you don't like it or something, but at least watch it and let me know if you like it, because I really just tried to have a good time with that. I thought it came out okay, but again, let me know. Definitely just watch it first and at least let me know. That way I won't record another one in the future. That's all I ask, but at least give it a shot. And now we get into the end of the show, which here I will take my time to sincerely thank everybody for being here for as long as you've been around. It is quite humbling, and just thanks, you know what I mean? Like, there's really no other way to... Okay, here's the actual thing I want to say, and it's something I often say, you know, a lot when it comes to this topic, but you guys are what keeps me going, and the reason why I always say that is because let me share a little story with you real quick. I've always enjoyed YouTube. I've always enjoyed content creation, even before I was a part of content creation. When I was younger, I saw emerging platforms like YouTube and whatnot, and I thought, wow, that's really cool. It's a place for people to, you know, express themselves and create something and put something out there and be judged creatively for it. I always thought it was awesome, even before I started making videos. So back then, I even thought, wow, you know, that's awesome. So I actually even started like a podcast with a friend. We were very young, but it was something that we wanted to do because we just wanted to create something, and we did it for a year. And it was awesome, but we only ever received like 1 email from like a genuine viewer. So we like, it's you know, it's hard to put content out for so long and get nothing out of it, which I'm sure a lot of people struggle with today when they try to make YouTube videos or they try to Twitch stream and they get like, you know, 1 concurrent viewer, which is themselves. It's disheartening to do it for that long, and it's what burns people out of doing it. So when I started doing YouTube videos and actually somewhat gained a little bit of a following, it felt great. And despite the fact that I've been doing YouTube for so long, and many other YouTubers that have been doing it for as long as I have are much further along than say I am, that never has particularly bothered me because there is people here, and that's you. And you are what keep me going, because it really is just, it's awesome, right? I enjoy doing it, and at least somebody's out there saying, hey, I like it a lot. So it's awesome. So thanks a lot. There's nothing much more I can say. And it's not like this is the end. I'll see you next week for 301, where we'll stop making this a big charade. In episode 50, maybe I'll do something if I feel like it. I feel like I don't remember I don't remember the 50 increments, so I'm guessing I don't do anything for them. I can't even think off the top of my head, but at least the hundreds I try to do something a little different. Anyway, that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you guys next Friday.